pursuant to Section 5, Chapter 231, Public Law 1975. This is to state for the record that adequate notice of this meeting has been provided to the public by posting and maintaining the annual notice of regular meetings on the bulletin board of the municipal building, by mailing the annual notice of regular meetings for 2025 to the News Record and Star Ledger in December of 2024, and by filing said notice in the office of the Township Clerk.
Staffis,
Present.
Mr. DeLuca,
Here.
Zengel,
Here.
Ms. Herman,
Here.
Mayor Adams.
Here, thank you.
Whereas Chapter 231, Public Laws of 1975, commonly known as the Open Public Meetings Act, requires that all meetings of public bodies be open to the public, and whereas Section 7A provides that the governing body has the discretion to permit, prohibit, or regulate the active participation of the public at any meeting, and whereas desire the governing body to comply with the provisions of this act, same time to conduct its business in an orderly and expeditious manner, now therefore be it resolved by the Township Committee of the Township of Maplewood that it does hereby prohibit, except as set forth in the formal agenda, active participation in deliberations of the governing body by the public, and except as otherwise prescribed by law, does limit the public to the observations of the actions and discussions of the governing body at all of its regular and special meetings.
So moved.
Second.
Daffis,
Yes.
Mr. DeLuca,
Yes.
Ms. Engel,
Yes.
Ms. Herman,
Yes.
Mayor Adams.
Yes. Thank you. Please stand for the salute to the flag. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Good evening and welcome to the Tuesday, February 18th, 2025 meeting of the Maplewood Township Committee. Apologies for being a little bit late. Our closed session ran a little bit late with discussions. So tonight we have two appointments for boards and committees. We have Robin Gordon, Affordable Housing Board, and Becky Gannon for the Zoning Board of Adjustment. Then we have several ordinances on for final passage. Those will include any public comment pursuant to those ordinances will be taken during that public hearing, as opposed to public comment on agenda items only, which happens before the ordinances. Then we have, do we have any on new ordinances? No, right?
No.
I didn't think so. Okay, thank you. And then we have reports from departments, and then elected official reports. We have Committee Member Daffis, Committee Member DeLuca, Deputy Mayor Herman, Committee Member Engel, if you're still feeling well enough to join us. And then I go last. We have several discussion items on for tonight. Eliminating on-site non-residential parking requirements in the pedestrian retail business zone, which is on Springfield Avenue. We have another discussion item, expanding permitted uses in the commercial and industrial zone. We have overnight parking in public lots. Then we have a discussion item on amending the Recreation Advisory Committee ordinance to add mission, expand its membership, and allow subcommittees. And then we have a discussion item, updating a resolution, establishing an all-access committee to clarify scope, expand membership, and make other changes. And lastly, support or not for McKeon Smith Senate Bill and Hall Gill Climate Superfund Act that is in the legislature right now on a state level. Then we have the consent agenda, and we'll have a public comment for any issue, any topics, and then we'll adjourn. So with that, we'll move into boards and committees. Affordable Housing Board appointment, Mr. DeLuca.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I'd like to call up Robin Gordon. Come on up to the microphone there. Is that mic on?
This mic on? That mic?
What is
Why
that?
is that noise?
Okay.
So Robin is put in a volunteer form to join Affordable Housing Board, and you could tell us a little bit about your experience in affordable housing.
Well, thank you for having me this evening. I'm a 36-year Maplewood resident, and I've been working in affordable housing and neighborhood revitalization for the last 30 years. 20 years of volunteer work with Habitat for Humanity Newark, which overlapped partially with 18 years at HANDS, an Orange-based community development corporation, where I was the administrator, grants person, and worked in community building as well. Prior to that, I took some time to raise my two sons, who both went through the Maplewood Public School System. And prior to that, I worked in state and local government in Illinois, where I'm from. In those roles, I worked in capital improvements to public buildings and roadway improvements. In summary, I have a passion for meeting the society's basic needs. I'm a pretty basic person. Decent shelter and enough to eat are my priorities.
Radical, radical.
I think they're the foundation of a stable and thriving family, and that's where I like to put my volunteer efforts.
Awesome.
Great. Well, thank you. And so I would like to nominate Robin Gordon for a position on the Affordable Housing Board through December 31st, 2027.
I'll
I'll
second.
Thank you.
Sorry, beat you. Yes.
Mr. Daffis,
Yes, welcome. Thank you.
Mr. DeLuca.
Yes.
Ms. Herman,
Yes.
Mayor Adams.
Yes. Thank you so much for
you.
stepping up. I think you'll be really valuable with your background.
Yes.
Mr.
Great, thank you.
DeLuca's very happy. Okay, and then we move to Zoning Board of Adjustment. And Rebecca Gannon, want to come on up? Hi, good to see you. So just for the Township Committee's benefit, Rebecca and I spoke last year at a party we were at, a neighbor of yours, and she expressed interest in being on this and felt like she had a conflict with a neighbor, so she held off until that project was approved or denied. I don't know, because we don't go to the zoning board meetings, but why don't you tell us about yourself and why you're interested in this position?
So I'm a resident of Maplewood for going on 3 years. Grew up in Maplewood, moved away in high school, but loved the town. And when I got married, whopping 20-minute distance overall in my life. I have 10 years of construction commercial experience, specifically in the healthcare sector throughout the state of New Jersey, working for all different healthcare facilities, Hackensack, Summit, Health, Robert Wood. Have had Maplewood as my hometown for years. I want to continue that, and there's no reason not to be involved in the town that you're going to be a part of. My experience, I'm a licensed engineer in the state of New Jersey, though not so much on the design side. It's all the construction, which means working with local regulation, zoning, building. That's everyday work for me. So I'm confident that zoning board is a right fit for me to be able to volunteer and support the community that we're part of now.
Great. Any questions from my colleagues? No, then I will move the appointment of Rebecca Gannon to the Zoning Board of Adjustment. Do I have a second?
Second.
Mr. Daffis,
Yes.
DeLuca.
Yes.
Ms. Herman,
Yes.
Mayor Adams.
Yes, thank you. We finally got you there.
Welcome. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Have a good night. I mean, you can stay the whole meeting, but not required. So now we have public comment for agenda items only. I think, what time is it? There was someone coming from Environmental Advisory, right? Yeah, and I want to make sure before we have people in the room, we go to Zoom to see if, and it's Andrew, right? Yeah,
Yeah, Andrew Powell is on Zoom. He can be promoted.
yeah, and he has to take a call at 8, so we wanted to get him on first, so.
Hi there, can you hear me?
Yeah, Thank you.
Thank you so much. So yes, Andrew Howell here from the Environmental Advisory Committee. And here just to say that we support a resolution voicing support for a package of New Jersey policy actions to limit the impact of climate change, including the proposed New Jersey Climate Superfund Act, S3545, which I know you'll be discussing later today. Climate change is an urgent problem that needs to be addressed at the state and local level for the foreseeable future. We recommend going beyond support for S345, however, and use this opportunity to speak out in favor of additional legislative measures to reduce fossil fuel demand and provide funding for adaptation. And I'm just going to say a few words about that, if I may. We very much agree on the committee with the sentiments that are underpinning the New Jersey Climate Superfund Act, and that is that fossil fuel producers bear considerable responsibility for their contribution to global warming. For many years, we now have evidence they have earned enormous profits from the sale of fossil fuels and still have manipulated public perception and the political process to maintain business as usual, while knowing that these products cause climate damage. Much of this damage will be irreversible or require expensive adaptation measures, and we, of course, are seeing those effects in real time play out already, even here in our own town. Now, we do feel that this S3545 does suffer from some shortcomings that are likely to limit its effectiveness in the end. The policy may not have the desired impact on emissions and on warming trends. And this is why we would encourage the town to frame support for this bill more broadly. And we have a few suggestions for other priorities we think are even more important, which we would highly recommend that you highlight to the state in addition to any statement of support for that bill. Firstly, New Jersey really needs to reassert its leadership in the transition out of dependence on fossil fuels. We really need to replace gasoline and diesel for transportation, replace natural gas for generating electricity, and natural gas and oil for heat. One point we would like to make is the current reduction requirement for natural gas utilities right now on a state level is just 0.75% per year. That's almost insignificant. We think the legislature should be more ambitious than that, calling for annual reductions that ramp up to 5% per year if we have any chance of meeting the goal of 80% reduction in emissions by 2050. A second point, we need consistent support for vehicle electrification. And the legislature really should be urged to replace what's an unfairly high registration fee for electric cars, recommit to building out the charging infrastructure, regardless of actions at the federal level, which, as we know, has become more challenging now. Third point, there should be aggressive investigation and action by the legislature to overcome the electric grid and transmission infrastructure barriers to renewable electricity that are slowing down the transition. Fourth point, the legislature should be encouraged to provide strong oversight to ensure efficiency. Efficiency really is key. And electrification funding managed by the investor-owned utilities, make sure that's being used effectively to meet our climate goals. Two more points I'd make. We believe that the goals of S3545 could be achieved more effectively through the implementation of a price on carbon. That's really what would be more effective than the levy which is being discussed in this bill. Something like was put forward in New York's Cap and Invest program, which unfortunately has been delayed recently, but is still, we think, a more forward-looking and effective piece of legislation, which we think is worth recommending. Finally, New Jersey counties and municipalities really do need financial support for adaptation to climate change. We need that immediately rather than waiting for the funding that might come from the Superfund, which is being proposed in this act. Adaptation should be favored that recognize that climate change is a long-term problem needing for long-term solutions. So we put together those recommendations in a letter we've submitted to you. We hope that's helpful. We very much support what the town is doing on many fronts towards climate and the challenges, environmental challenges that we face as a township, and look forward to collaborating and supporting those efforts going forward.
Thank you. Okay. Is there anyone in the room that would like to speak on public comment agenda items only? Please identify yourself, address, and 3 minutes to speak.
Virginia Lamb Falconer, 3 Winthrop Place in Maplewood, and Soma Action Climate. And I'm here to comment on the Climate Superfund resolution. And as Andrew so articulately iterated, all the many points and the sort of shortcomings and benefits and so forth. And our group had a discussion with the EAC last night, and we were able to go over some of those things and have a really great conversation about it. And this is an extremely complicated issue, as we know, and the bill, it does raise many questions. But it's taken decades of lies and misinformation and greed and billions of dollars in influence peddling for all these fossil fuel companies to get where they are. They get trillions of dollars in federal subsidies every year to continue to pollute and just, kind of ruin it for everybody. So we know without a doubt that over the past 150 years, the combustion of fossil fuels has contributed greenhouse gases to our atmosphere, right? We know this. They've caused a dramatic increase in the average temperature of the Earth's surface. And then this surface warming has resulted in these catastrophic changes that we see, including temperature extremes, hot and cold, including droughts and floods, including crop losses, contributions to wildfires, increases in disease and pests, and on and on and on. There's no doubt that these things are related. The impacts are just going to continue to worsen, so it's time we held these polluters to account, which is exactly what this bill aims to do. And it's not a fast thing, as Andrew pointed out. It takes, I'm sure you all have read the bill. Within 2 years of its passage, it aims to have the Treasury prepare an assessment of greenhouse gas damages in New Jersey since 1995, damages that include health, infrastructure, natural resources, agriculture, and the economy. And then within 2 years after that, the DEP is directed to calculate the proportional liability and issue cost recovery demands to these companies and collect payments. Now, some people say maybe this is just going to be a super fund for lawyers. And who knows, maybe it is. But we still really need to take a stand. It's a really tall order. It may not be perfect. It may not accomplish what it intended to do. But from where we stand, we really need to support it. We need to come together in a unified way around the intent of this resolution that you're discussing tonight, stand up together to polluters that have made these awful decisions that we're all suffering from, and we can communicate with our representatives to make the legislation more effective. And concurrent with the things that the EAC has pointed out, the other initiatives to reduce demand and concurrent policies and programs. So, as always, I thank you all for your time and for your service, and that's it for me.
Thank you, Ms. Lamb. Not yet. Go ahead, not you, him. I'm talking to.
I'm Phoebe
Sorry.
Spanier. I live at 44 Jefferson Avenue in Maplewood. I'm also speaking about the Climate Superfund Act. I'm also from Soma Action Climate. So I don't want to waste your time by reiterating what other people have already said. So I'll just say a couple of quick things. One is to note that our Assemblywoman Garnet Hall is a primary sponsor of this bill, and so I think this is an opportunity to collaborate with her to show our support for legislation that she's supporting. Another point is that with Mayor Adams' advocacy, Maplewood was one of the first municipalities to pass a resolution in support of the state suing fossil fuel companies for some of these same issues. And so this is a chance for Maplewood to continue to lead on that topic. And yeah, other municipalities have also passed resolutions, including Hoboken, Jersey City, South Orange is on the way to passing a resolution. So I think we should stand up and pass one too. And I very much agree with the EAC that this in itself is not a silver bullet, but I think every step counts. So this would be one. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Appreciate your time. Anyone else in the room want to speak on any agenda items? Seeing none, Mr. Ware, is there anyone on Zoom who would like to speak?
Mr. Hallkamp, welcome to public portion. You may unmute yourself and address the committee.
Thank you. It's Dave Helmkamp, 571 Prospect Street. I wanted to discuss briefly the discussion item you guys have on the agenda for non-residential parking. And if it's possible, I'd like to share a screen. to do that?
I don't think that's possible, Mr. Helmkamp, so,
Is it? Is it not?
oh, he's doing it? Okay.
Yeah, except leave it to me. I shared the wrong one. Hold on. Yeah, I had provided this to the planning board, this chart, which is a kind of numerical view of parking. And I wanted to suggest that we fill out the left-hand side. I had previously done, I'm sorry, fill out the right-hand side. I had previously done the left-hand side. Left-hand side addresses density, and the right-hand side addresses parking issues connected with multifamily. I shared that with the planning board after they voted on the various ordinances on the agenda tonight. But in addition, there's a second page here that kind of gives the circumstances that I believe we face regarding parking. And I would ask that you review this and consider how it may drive our priorities on parking. I think in summary, I would say that whether it's apparent or not, that a plan for parking at this stage, and what I mean by that is that this point in the 21st century, is vital to all the progressive aspirations that appear elsewhere in our master plan. And in fact, the author emphasized in this little clip that I put on the right-hand side of the slide, emphasized that analysis and policy changes should be addressed in looking at parking into the future. So my message for tonight is that zoning really needs to be forward-looking. Yes, there are certain priorities today in the marketplace regarding parking, and we are in a transition. But projects done in the next month or 6 months or a year will be with us for 30. And there's a tremendous amount of academic work in this area, and I think we should start drawing on it and perhaps find ourselves in the vanguard. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now promoting Rob Howley to panelist. Mr. Howley, welcome to public portion. You may unmute yourself and address the committee.
Hi there, Rob Howley, 497 Richmond. I'm also joining in about the non-residential parking requirement discussion item. I just state my support for eliminating minimum non-residential parking requirements along Springfield and any other business district. Parking is among the lowest value land uses available. Parking requirements are bad for the climate, bad for business districts, because people spend money, not cars, and induces additional traffic, which no one wants. It's overall just bad for the community. I hope we can continue down this path and revisit minimum parking requirements townwide. The land in Maplewood is valuable. Our ordinances should reflect that and prioritize people over required car storage. Thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else, Mr. Worry?
I see no other hands, Mayor.
Okay, great. With that, we'll move into ordinances on final passage. We have ordinance number 3142-25, Ms. Fritzen.
Yes, Mayor. These are all on final passage. Ordinance number 3142-25 is an ordinance to amend Chapter 271 of the Code of the Township of Maplewood entitled Zoning and Development Regulations with respect to site plan requirements. This ordinance will amend Article 5 zoning provisions of Chapter 271 of the Township Code to exempt certain interior building alterations and certain development subject to redevelopment plans from site plan approval requirements.
Okay, this ordinance has been published, copies posted on the bulletin board of the municipal building, and copies made available to the general public in accordance with the law. Opening a hearing right now for this ordinance on final passage. So is there anyone who would like to speak or ask questions about this ordinance? There's no one in the room, so.
I'm now promoting Mr. Helkamp to panelist. Mr. Helkamp, you're now in public portion.
Hi, hello again. I also raised a point at the planning board meeting on this ordinance, and however, it was made after the planning board had voted. So I thought I would share with you all. I really only have one concern about this ordinance, and it has nothing to do with its intent, but rather the fact that, to my understanding, I believe it bypasses notification to the public by virtue of not requiring a planning board meeting for a use change. And I just feel that a use change is material, whether it requires a variance or not, is material to the immediate residents, particularly in the case of a restaurant, for example, that might in fact be compliant, but residents would really like to understand the proposal for the restaurant in particular. We hear regularly complaints or concerns rather about noise, smells, trash, parking in connection with restaurants. And to the extent that they're close to residences, it would be good if the residents knew that the use change was being done. So I would make the suggestion that perhaps notification should be required and residents be referred to the zoning officer so that they can express any concerns that they have. And then, of course, the decision is still in the hands of the zoning officer. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak to this ordinance? Mr. Worry?
I just have a question. Are we able to bring
Yeah,
him up? He wasn't brought up on his picture.
his face. No.
His camera was turned off. So if your camera's turned off, you don't appear on the screen here.
Could you just remind people to put their cameras on?
Yeah,
Can you do
absolutely.
that? Thank you.
Is there anyone else who would like to speak to this ordinance? Mr. Worry?
I see no other hands, Mayor.
Okay, thank you.
Mayor,
Yes.
before we move on, for the record, we should state that this ordinance, in addition to the other 3 zoning change ordinances that are on tonight
Mhm.
were all submitted to the planning board, and the planning board determined that each of them were consistent with the master plan.
Yes, each of them are consistent with the master plan. Mr. Daffis, since you're going to move this, if you want to say anything prior to moving it, please do.
Just quickly, Mayor, and thank you for the opportunity. I'm going to repeat what I've said before, what we've all said before in response to some of the commentary we heard tonight, which is that our master plan recommends a balancing act. It recommends exempting from site plan review and therefore the burden on a potential small business, financial and other, in circumstances where we can do that. And it recommends that we find an exemption narrowly tailored. And what we have done is narrowly tailored. And as we mentioned before, as I've mentioned before, the zoning board, we have the discretion always to, if the use, the permitted use, the change in permitted use is one that is more expansive than the previous permitted use, to require site plan review and not have that not go through the planning board. But there has to be a balance. We cannot force small businesses to sit through and pay thousands of dollars so that the planning board and members of the public can answer questions that our township officials can answer, such as where are you going to put your trash? What are your hours? How late are you open? Are you having chairs outside or inside? I'm not discounting the commentary received, and I'm not making light of it, but I am strongly recommending that we keep in mind what we want to do here, which is to balance things out and to make doing business in Maplewood easier in the most appropriate manner, and that is achieved here.
Right.
So with that, I'm going to move the ordinance be adopted as a whole, and the clerk be directed to publish the same as a passed ordinance in the Maplewood South Orange News Record according to law.
I'll second that and just make it clear that this, if there are external changes to property, then it does in fact will get moved over for site plan review. So internal changes are not necessary. So with that, Ms. Fritzen, we have a movement and a second.
Mr. Daffis,
Yes.
Mr. DeLuca.
Yes.
Ms. Herman,
Yes.
Mayor Adams.
Yes. Thank you. Next ordinance 3143-25. Ms. Fritzen.
Yes, Mayor. Item 7B, ordinance number 3143-25 is an ordinance to amend Chapter 271 of the Code of the Township of Maplewood entitled Zoning and Development Regulations to rezone certain properties within the Highway Business Zoning District. This ordinance will amend Article 5 zoning provisions of Chapter 271 of the Township Code to rezone certain properties currently in the Highway Business HB zoning district to the R14 residential zoning district or the office business OB zoning district.
This ordinance has been published, copies posted on the bulletin board in the municipal building, and copies made available to the general public in accordance with the law. Mr. Daffis, can I get a motion for this ordinance? Oh, sorry, I need to open a hearing. My bad. I caught myself, though. Nobody had to tell me. Mr. Wary, is there anyone online who would like to speak to this ordinance?
Any members joining on Zoom would like to speak on this ordinance, please raise your hand now. I see no hands, Mayor.
Great, Mr. Daffis.
Mayor, I move this ordinance to be adopted as a whole and the clerk be directed to publish the same as a passed ordinance in the Maplewood South Orange News Record according to law.
I'll second. Ms. Fritzen?
Mr. Daffis,
Yes.
Mr. DeLuca,
Yes.
Ms. Herman,
Yes.
Mayor Adams.
Yes.
Next, Mayor, we have item 7C, also on final. Ordinance number 3144-25 is an ordinance to amend Chapter 271 of the Code of the Township of Maplewood entitled Zoning and Development Regulations with respect to the Research and Office Zoning District. This ordinance will amend Article 5 zoning provisions of Chapter 271 of the Township Code to eliminate the Research and Office RO zoning district and to include the subject property in the Highway Business HB zoning district.
Mayor, I know that this item is on for second reading and potential adoption tonight. However, this ordinance requires additional notice, and we are working with our neighboring municipalities to receive the mailing lists that are required for their residents or property owners who are within the 200 feet zone. So rather than having hearing tonight, I think the most appropriate thing would be a motion to table until the March 18th meeting. Because it is being tabled to a date certain, there will be no additional public notice or, posted notice of any kind.
Okay. All right, so we're not doing the hearing, or we're just going to postpone the hearing to next time? So we do we move it and vote it down, or we just move to table?
Move to table until the March 18th meeting,
Okay,
at which time both the hearing and second reading will be held.
okay. Mr. Daffis, you want to make that motion?
Certainly, Mayor. I move that we table ordinance number 3146-25. Is that the correct one?
3144?
Oh, I'm ahead of myself.
You are.
4-4, yeah.
44, yes.
Back to the research and office zone.
3144-25 until March
18th?
18th.
Second.
Mr. Daffis,
Yes.
Mr. DeLuca,
Yes.
Ms. Herman,
Yes.
Mayor Adams.
Yes. We have another ordinance on for final.
Yes, Mayor, it's item 7D, ordinance number 3145-25, calendar year 2025, ordinance to exceed the municipal budget appropriation limits and to establish a cap bank per NJSA 40A 4-45.14.
Okay, this ordinance has been published, copies posted on the bulletin board in the municipal building, and copies made available to the general public in accordance with the law. Opening the hearing. Is there anyone who would like to speak to this ordinance?
Anyone joining on Zoom would like to speak on this ordinance, please raise your hand now. Moving over, Dave Helkamp to public portion.
Or the municipal budget? Okay.
Mr. Helkamp, welcome to public portion. You may unmute yourself. Please
Ms.
turn on your
Yeah.
video and address the Township Committee.
Hi, I have to apologize. I lost track of the agenda. Was this regarding, the parking or one of the other ordinances?
No, this is regarding the municipal budget appropriation limits.
I'm sorry, I didn't have the paper copy in front of me. I will stand down for a moment.
If you were going to speak to the ordinance on with respect to the research and office zone and the highway business zone, that one is tabled until March 18th while we do public notice or what's it called, legal notices to with people in the next town that are 200 feet from the district.
Yes, thank you. I think I nodded off while that was being discussed, and then I lost track of the agenda.
Got it. Okay.
I'll stand down for a moment. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, then I will move. Oh, is there anyone else?
I see no other hands, Mayor.
I move this ordinance be adopted as a whole and the clerk be directed to publish the same as a passed ordinance in the Maplewood South Orange News Record according to law.
I second the motion.
Mr. Daffis?
Yes.
Mr. DeLuca?
Yes.
Ms. Herman?
Yes.
Mayor Adams?
Yes, thank you. Next ordinance, 7E.
Yes, Mayor, it's ordinance number 3146-25. On the agenda, it's item 7E. An ordinance to amend chapter 271 of the Code of the Township of Maplewood entitled Zoning and Development Regulations with respect to residential parking requirements. This ordinance will amend Article 5 zoning provisions of chapter 271 of the Township Code to reduce the number of parking spaces required for residential uses.
This ordinance has been published, copies posted on the bulletin board in the municipal building, and copies made available to the general public in accordance with the law. Did you hear that? I'm going to open the hearing for public comment. Is there anyone who would like to speak on this ordinance?
Yes, I'm moving over Rob Howley to panelist. Mr. Howley, welcome to public portion. You may unmute yourself and address the committee.
Hi again, Rob Howley, 497 Richmond. I support the reduction in minimum parking requirements, 2 to 1. That's great. Housing policy research indicates that each additional parking unit required raises monthly costs anywhere from $200 to $500 a month. So parking requirements are not only bad for the climate, local economy, transportation goals, but each spot we require severely undermines our affordable housing goals. So I hope we can keep reducing and eventually eliminate these requirements. Because not to say that no one will build parking anyway if they think it's worth it. I just shouldn't require it. And we should definitely keep whittling these down around the train station, because there's few things more wasteful than parking next to a train. Walking across an empty parking lot to get to the train doesn't make a lot of sense. It goes against a large body and growing body of transit-oriented development research. So good work. Thank you, and keep it up.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Yes, now promoting Dave Helkamp to panelist. Welcome, Mr. Helkamp. You can unmute yourself and address the committee.
Hi, I bet you expected to hear from me. I agree completely with the previous on the points that he raised. This ordinance certainly has that effect. And I'm not suggesting that it not be approved, but to put a finer point on my earlier public comments, in isolation, really, without analyzing site by site, in isolation, what this ordinance really does, and it is, to the extent a site supports it, allow for additional apartments. And the end result will, of course, be about the same amount of parking area consumed. The master plan makes pretty strong statements around a lot of aspects that drive towards fewer cars. And to the extent that this ordinance allows someone to build more apartments, it's not going to reduce the number of cars. And it's also going to impinge on potential for active streetscape. So that was sort of the concern that motivated the chart that I showed during the public comments. I think that in isolation, this one change is counter to a variety of master plan goals. It should be considered in the context, or other aspects should be considered soon to balance this. And the most obvious one that's highly recommended also by research is a maximum parking limit. So I encourage us to, and I can certainly help, fill out that chart and take a hard look at how parking affects all the goals in the master plan. It's heavily researched and there's a lot of data to draw on, and I think we can lead the way. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else, Mr. Ware?
I see no other hands, Mayor.
Okay, thank you. And may I get a motion, Mr. Daffis?
With delight, Mayor. And again, I just want to preface this by saying this is one of the many things that we're doing to meet the goals of the master plan and our policy objectives. On its own, this achieves the goal of reducing the number of parking spaces required for residential uses, but it does not stand alone. It is also to work alongside our other land use and zoning codes. So again, just want to make that clear. And with that, I move that this ordinance be adopted as a whole and the clerk be directed to publish the same as a passed ordinance in the Maplewood South Orange News Record according to law.
A second. Ms. Fritzen, please call a roll.
Mr. Daffis?
Yes.
Luca?
Yes.
Herman?
Yes.
Mayor Adams?
Yes, thank you very much. Right now, we'll move on to reports, administrative reports. Mr. Ware.
Thank you, Mayor. A reminder that next week on the 25th, we will have our third and final budget workshop where we will present open space, new employee requests, revenue, capital recommendations, and budget recommendations. So that meeting begins at 6 here and will also be on Zoom for the public. All right. That's my report.
That's your whole report?
The whole thing.
Whole thing. Any questions for our administrator? Yes.
Do we have a timeline for when we'll receive materials related to the capital budget?
Either tomorrow or Thursday morning.
Thank you.
Yeah, they were working on it with engineering today, so there goes all our money.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions for Mr. Ware? All right, with that, we'll move on to Ms. Credidio.
A brief report, Mayor. As you probably remember, there was legislation passed at the end of last year extending the ability to advertise in the Star Ledger even after it had gone digital through March. As that deadline looms, there's legislation now pending that would punt that deadline to year end. There are still battles being waged in Trenton over whether it should be moved off of publishing with newspapers entirely and just to, local websites or to some kind of state clearinghouse website, reflecting how people get their information about public meetings today. But for the moment, we believe that that is going to pass before the deadline, and we will be able to continue using the Star Ledger as one of our publications year end.
Okay.
I would like us to, at some point, think about taking a position on this because I mean, if you look at the Star Ledger online now, I mean, all the legal notices are at the very end. Nobody ever gets to them. And if we're going to, and this is, clear, when they were a written newspaper and they were paying people to actually report on the news, I was willing to let it go, keep putting the things in there because it's a way to support news. But now, I mean, the newspaper is all stuff from wire services, Washington Post and Associated Press and all that. So they're not really covering local stuff anymore. So if we have an option of putting notices on our website and we have to go out and do something else, I mean, we still have the news record, but I would urge us to look at Tap Into and Village Green. If we have to do it in some kind of electronic format, I'd rather do it and support our local press as opposed to the Star Ledger.
100%.
Definitely.
Yeah, and I was going to make this part of my report that I've been in conversation with Senator Burgess, Senator McKeon, and our assembly representatives about this, and I urge the rest of you to do the same. Because S4136 merely extends the deadline until the end of the year. It punts the issue, and it does not establish a permitted use in the manner Committee Member DeLuca just described. And local news is the only defense we have right now. We know from our social media feeds and everything that's going on that these big conglomerates are subject to misinformation and disinformation. Local news is really what we need to really be permitting explicitly through legislation. So as Attorney Credidio mentioned, the expectation on Thursday of this week is that 4136 is going to move out of committee, but it's not too late to reach out to our representatives with a phone call or email and ask for an amendment to do more.
I just want to point out that the Associated Press is not a big conglomerate. It is a nonprofit, and they do very good work. But they are not local. We don't have an AP reporter based in Maplewood reporting on Maplewood. We do have local reporters that report for Village Green and Tap Into. And so I would absolutely agree with what Mr. DeLuca said and Mr. Daffis in that if we were able to put this in a local media source that helps our local reporters, that's what I'd like to do.
Why don't I make a motion that we send we ask the clerk to send our position that we'd like to have our local electronic media Tap Into and Village Green considered for local notices.
Yep.
Committee, are we also in favor of simply permitting publication of municipal meetings on the municipality's website?
Yes, that too.
Is the state considering anything about?
I'm sorry, I made a motion.
Okay.
I'll second your motion.
Yeah, but I didn't ask for a second on it yet, so let me move on. Is the state considering any resource, because let's say, a contractor is looking for RFPs or public notice or things like that. Is there a centralized online thing
It's
to do it?
one of the options they were discussing is whether there could be some sort of, clearinghouse, some sort of state.
Right, instead of somebody having to go to 564 municipal websites. Yeah. So there's a motion for a resolution apparently on the table. Can I get a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Daffis,
Yes.
Mr. DeLuca.
Yes.
Ms. Herman,
Yes.
Mayor Adams.
Yes, thank you. Anything else, Ms. Cordelia?
Mayor.
Thank you. Any other questions for our attorney? Seeing none, we'll move on to our clerk's office. Ms. Pritzen.
Hey, thank you, Mayor. So I just want to report since our last Township Committee meeting, we had a walkthrough of Clinton Elementary for polling place relocation from Columbia High School. And we found that it would be a good change to go back, a place that we haven't been at for approximately 5 years, but originated from, and I sent to Township Committee my remarks, what the positives were, and it was my recommendation to the Board of Elections And they had a representative at the walkthrough as well, that we return to Clinton School. I haven't heard anything back, but it would be a positive move for us to do that. So if you have any questions,
And everybody who visited felt the same way, like from the county.
100%.
Mhm. Okay.
Okay, the rest of my report is basically as outlined during the budget workshops. The township's clerk's office has been collaborating with the new public information officer to improve outreach efforts. And over the past month, we've taken steps to expand communication, including a targeted e-blast, which can be found on the township website. For those of you that didn't receive it, it's posted up. Additionally, we're working with the public information officer to develop an annual bulletin that would be distributed. We're looking at alongside the official tax statement mailing. And this approach would allow us to provide important information directly to residents without incurring additional mailing costs. That's my report.
Okay. Anyone have any questions for Ms. Fritzen? Nothing on the Clinton School thing? Okay, cool. All right. With that, we'll move on to elected official reports. Committee Member Daffis, you're up.
Thank you, Mayor. I have a few items. Certainly, Code Committee remains busy with zoning changes, and we have a couple more on for discussion, so we'll talk about those when we get there. The Arts Council, Maplewood Arts Council, met last night for the first time in this new year. We have a full council in terms of membership, and the council is excited about moving forward a public art installation that they were looking into last year that sort of fell apart when they lost access to our Maplewood Arts and Culture Manager because we didn't have one. But now that we have one, they all met at the council meeting last night, and it was great. And we talked, of course, about the very exciting upcoming Just Like a Girl call for female artists age 10 to 20 years old in honor of Women's History Month this March. And you can find out more information about that on our website. And certainly we'll be putting out a lot of communication about that. Also last night, at the same time that the Arts Council was meeting, the Open Space Trust Fund Committee met as well. And they approved all of the requests they were presented with. Those requests amounted to a total of about $596,000, which leaves us a balance in the Open Space Trust Fund of about 168, close to 170, $170,000. And we look forward to their presentation next on the 25th, right? They're coming on the 25th, next week. We talked about Trenton advocacy for 4136. I also urge my colleagues to reach out to our representatives to talk about state aid and the school funding formula. We understand that there might be an opportunity for some amendments to reflect the current reality of things in our communities, especially in light of expected reduced state aid forthcoming. And that budget is about to be announced, I think, next week as well. And lastly, I want to announce, and I want to give all of us kudos for this, because everything that we do up here is a team effort. Everything is a team effort. But I have the distinct honor of representing this incredible township and this progressive, forward-thinking governing body at the National Alliance to End Homelessness National Conference in LA next week. Why am I doing that? What are we spotlighting? Well, the conference this year is focusing on suburban communities that found direct, innovative ways to support and find ways to divert their homeless population. And we certainly did that with our engagement with CSP&J as we presented here to the public. And of all the suburban communities, in our great nation, Maplewood in the spotlight. And so I'm really, really excited about that. And I will be presenting some of the stuff that we presented here in the public and just talking about how we always felt that it was the right thing to do. Local government should take care of its residents and do good. And everything we do should be rooted in public health, because homelessness prevention is good public health. That is my report, Mayor.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Daffis? Okay, seeing none, Mr. DeLuca. You're
Thank you, Mayor. Black History Month. We're
halfway.
halfway, a little more than halfway, but we have a lot of stuff happening this week. Thursday night, we have Words is doing something, and the Hilton neighborhood is doing something. Columbia High School Jazz Ensemble is doing something at South Orange Performing Arts Center. And then at 4 o'clock on Thursday at the Hilton branch of the library, we have Kids Speak Out. So a lot of activities. This weekend, we have Trayvon Martin's birthday party at 11. We have Travel and Art at Asta's Gallery in the afternoon. Kubra is having another event there. So we just want to thank all our partners for participating with us on making Black History Month something very important here. As we've said at our various events, we're not running away from diversity and inclusion. We're going to keep promoting it. And while it's just unbelievable that the Department of Defense has just wiped Black History Month off the calendars there and other federal departments, we keep lifting ours up here. So I want to thank everybody for their support. I have a few reports from a couple of committees. Engineering, Public Works, and Planning. DeHart Park, we talked about that. Just to remind you all that we're still working on this. We have a plan to rebuild the grass field. We've been working with a consultant that we brought on. It's VHB Consultants, and we'll be putting an underground drainage system underneath the field. And then the proposal that we saw is to create 2 multi-purpose fields, eliminate the softball diamond. So we're still considering that. We're gathering some input, but we'll be coming out and talking to the community more about that. But we recognize the importance of having fields. The idea of having 2 fields is we could rest one and while people are playing on another. So we'll see if that's feasible. And we're coordinating our community services with engineering to talk this stuff out. Parker Avenue, bike lanes, we're still moving forward on that. We've had some meetings with some of the stakeholders, the institutional stakeholders, the high school, the Maplewood Jewish Center. We intend to have Zoom meetings in the evening next month. We're going to be breaking up the road based on the way the parking is. So for example, between Valley and Maplewood Avenue, there is no parking on West Parker. So that we just want to talk to those folks there and explain what we're doing with the bike lanes. Between Valley and Prospect, there's parking on different sides. Some of it is parking on the high school side. Some of it's parking on the other side. So that has a little bit different experience there. Prospect to Boyden, there's parking on both sides. That's probably the widest area there. So, that is a whole different conversation. And then from Boyden to Irvington Avenue, it gets a lot tighter and a lot more street parking. We're going to have a conversation about that too. So we're moving forward. This also will be one of the topics that gets discussed in the capital plan, because if we institute a bike lanes, it will cost a significant amount of money because we want to do it with the proper striping and protection. We talked about our sanitary sewer overflows. We're having some severe problems on Lower Boyden Avenue and on West Parker, in which we're getting sewage that's entering into people's homes, some of it on the street. So we're looking at ways in which we can divert stormwater that seems to be getting into our sanitary sewer. So we'll be working on that in the next couple of months. Prospect Street, I know there was a new thread today about the cones. We are looking to replace those cones. with what's called quick curb with bollards. They're these bollards that stick up, so they'll be in there. They get bolted into the asphalt. It's a much better system than the cones. The longer range plan is that in 2026, we're going to pave Parker. So this year, we're going to be talking about the design. What do we want on Parker? Can we accommodate bikes, no bikes, parking, no parking, bump outs, no bump outs? So that'll be a conversation that we'll engage in this year and then develop the plan and start the work in 2026. On our Public Safety Committee, last Wednesday night on the 5th, or I guess 2 Wednesdays ago, we went to an award dinner, and our Deputy Chief Malloy, she received an award. So we wanted to congratulate her publicly and just let everyone know. Peace Island organization was the one who did it, and she is also going to be the speaker at the Hilton Neighborhood Association's Women History Month as our first female deputy chief in the history of Maplewood. We have police vacancies, so if you're interested in being a cop, this is the time. You can come and approach us here in Town Hall, and we can set you up. We're also going to be doing a job fair at Kane University. Crossing Guard Appreciation Week, we're having an event for them on Tuesday, March 4th. And we hear a lot about enforcement, and I could just tell you that the people up here, when we meet with the chief and we meet on the Public Safety Committee, we talk about it too. And we want strict enforcement of our driving. We feel that we want to promote pedestrian safety, continue to make this a walkable community. I have some statistics I'll just share with you. Crashes, we don't call them accidents anymore. They're now, the term is crashes, because there's really not an accident. Oftentimes people are at fault. So crashes in 2023, we had 777. In 2024, we had 714, so that's a drop of 8%. Crashes that involved pedestrians, in 2023, we had 14, and in 2024, we had 11. So that's a drop of 21%. We still want to get that down more. The zero campaign is to have no crashes, no accidents, no injuries. So that's what we're trying to do. As far as vehicle stops, we stopped 4,000 vehicles in 2024. We issued 2,000 moving violations, 54 radar summonses, and 850 warning notices. So our police are out there. They're stopping cars. They're checking things out. And we're working with them. We'd like to see those numbers go up. And we've done some shift changing, and we've talked to the chief about some of his plans for deployment. And we think that we're going to continue to have good enforcement out there, or even better enforcement than. So I just want people to know that it's not that we're doing nothing. We can't catch everyone, but we are catching a significant amount of people now. And lastly, I just want to give you a quick update on the new library. Right now, the plan is a late June opening to the public. The interior construction of the library is just about done. I got a couple more weeks to finish that. Then they'll be working on outside. Once the weather breaks, it's a little frozen right now, but they'll be doing the outside work. And then after the construction is done inside, we need about 100 days, and that's to install the furniture and the shelving, to do a flush out. And that's a 14-day period where you just run all the systems and get all the bad smells and chemicals and everything out of the building before people go in. And then also putting books and electronics in there. So again, we're shooting for the end of June or sometime in June. But we're moving forward, and I'm sure people are seeing more and more progress every day. And that's my report.
Thank you, Mr. DeLuca. Any questions for our colleague?
I keep getting asked, Mr. DeLuca, about the funding for the library. Did you find out if we were able to separate out some of that and get some money
Get some
sooner?
money before Trump takes it away, I think she's saying.
So we did get a letter from FEMA saying that the court case, that the money was frozen, but the court case overturned that.
Yep.
So as long as the court case is in place. We just got another notice of an allocation of FEMA money for some work we had from from Ida on some roads. So that's a good sign that the money's being processed, but you never know.
Yeah.
It's about $1.5 million
Yeah.
Just for the library.
that's in jeopardy right now. And that also affects the grant that we have for the police heat pump
Affects the grant
and the grant for the electric buses.
and the grant for, that through Mikey Sherrill's office for almost.
Yes, and for the sanitation, right. So hopefully, the courts will continue to be strong and not allow this money to be not spent.
Yeah, it's been congressionally allocated, so.
Yeah, well,
And the word with FEMA is it's been obligated. So an obligation with FEMA is like a contract.
yeah.
Yeah.
So once it's obligated, that gives you the sign to go ahead and do the work.
Right.
So you figure all those communities that were devastated by Ida and by all the subsequent storms and what have you, they all relied on that obligation to do work.
To
People
fix
spent
stuff.
money and and they need to be reimbursed.
Right.
So
All right, we'll move on to Deputy Mayor Herman.
Yes. So I hope everyone has been enjoying all of these wonderful Black History Month events. I wanted to point out another one that is next week. It is the CPAC SOMA Race and Special Education. It is the annual look at the intersectionality of race and special education in our community. And this is a meeting that CPAC has been doing for a while, so I hope people will join. We have special guests, Nicole Josie and Ellis Peters. Ellis is the one who's been doing swim lessons
Swim
for
lessons,
adults at our pool.
Mhm.
And Nicole has been very involved in PTA and President's Council. So that should be a really good meeting, and it'll be on Zoom, so easy to attend. So I have a few updates. In the Health and Community Services meeting, two of the discussion items are about some of the things we discussed, the Fields Committee and the All Access Committee. And so I have been talking to some folks who raised their hand to serve in these committees, and I'm also looking, for others. We put out the call in the community for volunteers to our committees. Those are two that we are looking. I'm specifically looking for the Recreation Advisory Committee. We need volunteers for that, and especially if we have the field subcommittee included in the Recreation Advisory Committee, we need people to put their hands up and step forward. And the Seniors Committee is also looking for members, and there are some members that don't have to be seniors. You can take a look at that as well. I wanted to point out, we had a really wonderful discussion this morning in our communications committee. And so if you are not following us on Instagram, please go right now. It is Maplewood TWP on Instagram, and we're pushing out a lot of news, including reminding everybody when our township committee meetings are so that you can tune in and watch us. We're reminding people about recycling. If you can't keep up if it's commingled or not, you can check us there. And, we're doing Tip Tuesday. So every Tuesday we'll have a special tip. And we're trying to get out all of our stormwater utility reminders to tell residents about this. Lots of good stuff. So please follow us there. And also, if you have not signed up for town emails, please go to our website and sign up. We also have an archive now on our website of those emails. You can take a look at really good information. This is a must-read email that you have to read every week. And we've seen the numbers increase both on Instagram and on our emails. And so that's a really good sign that we're reaching more and more residents, but there are more residents to reach. So I'm going to end with a really happy news. This is so exciting. Our basketball program. So we have a new spring basketball program, Mapso Madness, and we actually had to delay the tryout dates because so many of our teams made the playoffs. This is amazing. So, okay, if you have your phones out, here's another Instagram to follow. It's Mapso Basketball. And you can see how our teams are doing. I want to give a huge shout out to the 5th grade girls. They finished their regular season first place with a 14-0 record. And they're going into playoffs as the first seed. And so really congratulations to all of these girls on the team. You can look on your Instagram and see pictures of them. Also want to say congratulations to the fifth grade boys. They finished at 12-2 and clinched the second seed. And then we have our third and fourth grade girls, 13-1 with a second seed. And our third and fourth grade boys also finished 13-1 and clinched the second seed. So we've got the playoffs coming up at the end of this month. It's gonna be really exciting to see how they all go. And we'll be pushing the information about when these games are on our Instagram. So follow us, follow Mapso Basketball, and you can cheer our amazing youth athletes on. And that is my report.
Thank you. And thanks, shout out to Coach Mike and
Yep.
Assistant Coach Ed, because Mike's really grown the program and just puts his heart and soul into it. So that's great. Any questions for Deputy Mayor? No, seeing none. Okay. I know committee member Engel is not feeling well, and there she is. I texted you because I didn't want to call on you if you were back in bed, trying to get some rest. But if you're up for a report,
I have no report except stay home if like I did. And thank you for Malia, for Ms. Herman for reporting on Communications Committee.
there you go. Great. Thank you. Feel better. And for my report, I just wanted to share with my colleagues, especially because I'm going to draft a letter in response to, once I hear from the president of the Board of Ed and the superintendent are meeting about this. They received a letter from the United States Department of Education Office for Civil Rights. It was sent on February 14th. Basically, the upshot of it is that they are threatening removal of federal funding from schools that unless they remove their DEI policies. So, and this is in all 50 states, school districts all over. It's pretty disgusting, as you know, we probably all agree. This is, they kind of flip the discrimination banner, if you will, to discriminating against, you know, the people who aren't considered being discriminated against and not against those who are historically discriminated against. So this is very disturbing, and we are hoping, I shouldn't say we, I'm hoping in just brief conversations that we'll get some directive from the superintendent and the Board of Ed president as to what they would like from us. But I would circulate to my colleagues any letter that I draft for your approval to respond to this and try to, you know, and if necessary, get as loud as possible. Mayor Collum has also been consulted about this, the two of us together. So the DEI programs they're talking about are as being discriminatory against those people who are not, that we don't usually use these practices to protect. So there was concern about the intentional integration plan or initiative, but that's, we're confirmed that that's not based on race and they can't use it as something against us because it's something that we have in practice that wouldn't be able to be just stopped like a DEI policy might be. So anyway, more on that when I have something more. But I will share with you anything that gets written to be shared. I just want to find my other. Okay. I just want to give a brief update at our economic development, what is it, Committee of Entrepreneurship and Economic Development, our seed committee meeting last week. We discussed the Maplewood Movie Theater redevelopment plan, and also we will be, basically key takeaways on it. We updated the plan to incorporate feedback from the public in the other 3 public sessions from HPC, Historic Preservation Commission, the Maplewood Village Alliance and the Maplewood Film Society, is that what it's called? Okay, we forwarded all those written comments from those three organizations to our planner. And we went through the entire plan and incorporated much of a combination of all those things. Those things were incorporated. Our planner went over them at our seed committee. And we will basically be incorporating the ones that we all agreed on, and then we will schedule another public meeting, hopefully in the next few weeks, but it might be, we have to talk administratively of when that would work. But we will do one more public meeting to show the latest updated, taking in all those considerations. On a future township committee, we will have a discussion what that was discussed at the seed meeting on cannabis consumption lounges. There is a desire by a local dispensary owner to take advantage of the state law allowing for consumption lounges, but an ordinance on the local level has to be passed in order for her to apply to do that in Maplewood. So we had some agreement, some disagreement in that meeting, and we'll discuss it more, in the coming weeks. So that's all I have. If there's any questions for me, I will entertain them. Okay, that's it. So we'll move on to discussion items, which we have a few. So, Mr. Davis, the first one goes to you for eliminating on-site non-residential parking requirements in the PRB zone.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. And if okay with you and everyone else, I can, do the first and the second one together.
Sure.
Okay, so the first one is about eliminating on-site non-residential parking requirements in the PRB zone. This is a continuation of our discussions about eliminating parking in the PRB zone. This is an attempt to do that, to align us with our recent site plan exemption ordinance or code amendment rather, and also to ensure that we are being equitable. In Maplewood Village, we don't have a parking requirement. We shouldn't have a non-residential parking requirement in the PRB zone on Springfield Avenue. So the proposal then, and this is something that is recommended by the master plan, although not exactly in these words, but it's clear in our recent discussions in Code Committee and here that finding ways to eliminate on-site parking requirements in pedestrian retail zone is a policy priority for the Township Committee and for our small businesses and the managers of our business districts. And we heard from them in particular about this. The proposal then does the following. It says that in the PRB district, on-site parking shall not be required for non-residential uses. There are 3 exceptions. Notwithstanding that, if there is a conversion of residential use to non-residential use, if the proposed use requires approval from the Planning Board or Zoning Board of Adjustment, or if the proposed use is part of a redevelopment area, minimum parking requirements under 27150J shall remain in effect and subject to the issuance of any variances as appropriate. So that is the proposal. Before we engage in discussion, I'm going to ask Township Attorney Credidio to chime in here. I believe Township Attorney Credidio has some questions and or concerns about this proposal.
So with respect to I'll start with the second part first. With respect to the exceptions that we just discussed, I'm not sure if that language perhaps is a carryover from when we were discussing the modifications to the definition of site plan exempt, which was passed on second reading earlier this evening. because those do sort of track those same categories, right? The concept of one use changing to another or being within a redevelopment plan. I think as a general rule, right, if we are determining that non-residential uses do not require parking, it's probably, we should, we don't necessarily need to include the exceptions unless there's a specific goal that we're not achieving. So for example, in going from residential to non-residential, if we think that generally non-residential uses don't require parking, what's our concern about non-residential uses that used to be on residential sites? Right? What is the concern about what used to be there as opposed to whether it was another non-residential use or an empty lot, or, what's the underlying concern that we're trying to address with that exception? Or is it just that it's a carryover from our prior conversations about site plan? Similarly, if we're saying if we're going to receive any other zoning or planning approvals, you would need to comply with the existing parking requirements. What's our underlying goal in that language? Because there may and may not be situations where simply going to the planning board, for example, for an additional setback or, some other fairly minor approval may not implicate the parking question in general. And then with respect to redevelopment plans, I think the redevelopment plans have the opportunity to have very specific parking requirements, in a very targeted area that perhaps we would like to leave to those plans as opposed to addressing more generally. That is, of course.
But a redevelopment plan would supersede the existing zoning anyway. So
Right.
if we were to change this to not require parking for commercial use or non-residential, is there any use that's not commercial that's non-residential? Because I think what we're intending is commercial. I just want to make sure we're not.
That's a great question. I mean, certainly there are, a house of worship, civic uses. There are other uses that are non-residential that I wouldn't consider commercial. That's a great point.
So maybe if we decide to do this, we change the wording a little bit so that we don't accidentally.
But I'm not sure that's what, is that what you're saying? Or are you saying that notwithstanding this policy decision, we don't necessarily, this is what I thought I heard or understood, so please correct me if I'm wrong. Notwithstanding the policy decision, adding the exemption language may not be necessary here because we've accounted for this elsewhere. Is that what you're saying?
That is what I was saying, yes.
Okay.
But then I think the mayor raises an important question about, more specifically, when we say non-residential, do we mean all non-residential or do we mean commercial uses?
I mean, we've been using it in the redevelopment plan discussions as far as only requiring parking for residential uses, like however many that is. Like for the movie theater redevelopment, for example.
Yeah, although the uses in the redevelopment plans tend to be a little more circumscribed, you don't generally have, the full
Right.
range of industrial.
Right, but since this is PRB zone, which is effectively most of Springfield Avenue, might we need other language?
So I'll tell you the basis for this is that in each of these. So right now on Springfield Avenue, there's probably about 5 properties that are just solely residential. So I'm thinking of one that's across the street from Cornbread. It's like a 6-story apartment building. And on the first floor are units, housing units. So if someone bought that and decided to take out those housing units and put stores there or a restaurant there, it seems to me that that should be looked at, probably would be looked at as by the planning board, because it goes, it's maybe external changes. I'm not even sure if it, I'm not even sure now because it, you know, it's not going to change the external, although maybe the front of it would be. So the idea is if you did that, or you took one of the, we have about, maybe we have like 3 single-family homes there on the avenue. If you took one of those homes and made it into a coffee shop or something, and you didn't have a way to just say, okay, that's such a dramatic use that we want to go and say, if it was planned to be a coffee shop, you would need X amount of seats, X amount of parking spaces for X amount of square footage, or X amount of seats. So that's what this is. It just allows us to revert back to something. If even the planning board, if the planning board didn't look at it, or if the planning board was going to look at something, and we didn't have this 27150J, then what would they look at? So if we talked about the conversion of Verjus, which was a restaurant, to Artie's, which was an 11-unit apartment building and a bar, you know.
Oh, you mean Union Pub?
Yeah, Avenue Pub. Why?
What did I say?
New Pub.
Oh,
I'm sorry, Artie's. I'm sorry, Avenue Pub.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was from Verjus to Avenue Pub. Thank you. So there was an intensity of use, and it added parking. So there was parking that had to be accounted for the apartments. And now this is a question of if the planning board had nothing, how would they judge whether or not you're providing sufficient parking for the expanded retail use, restaurant use?
So I heard 2 important things there. And one of them was exactly what I was thinking while you were talking, which is intensity of use, right? And is it maybe that we want to tie it to increased intensity? So for example, you know, if it was I don't know, if it was a small, or if even a large apartment building, let's go in the other direction. If it was a larger apartment building or a larger home that was then taken down for a smaller non-residential use, do we necessarily have the same concerns? So what I'm hearing really isn't the change in use so much as the change in intensity. The other thing is, when we're saying what would the planning board look at, well, if we're making a general policy determination that non-residential uses don't require parking, then they would look at it without the exceptions and say, okay, this non-residential use doesn't require any parking. And is there a concern perhaps about mixed uses as opposed to pure commercial uses, or? I guess
I'm not sure. Well, first of all, good luck on defining intensity. What does that mean?
you can define it with floor area ratio and density.
Well, how about a restaurant where the average seating was, we had 3 turnovers of a table. It was open, you know, some hours of the day where, you know, you only had 20 tables, 25 tables, and people stayed there. If you ever ate there, you stayed there for 2 hours. As opposed to a bar, which people are coming in and out more. So what is the intensity? Maybe the square footage didn't change, but the nature of the beast changed a lot. So, and to me, if the planning board had no way to judge or no way to require off-site parking for something like that, then I would not vote for this because that's not my intent. My intent is to have exceptions, is generally to allow, you know, the commercial space not to have off-site parking, but where there's these kinds of activities. I mean, if we didn't have, like when Walgreens was in a redevelopment area. So when we determined how many parking spaces Walgreens needed on the corner of Springfield Avenue and Burnett, we used the basis of what a large retail store needed. So that was the basis. And then we negotiated and gave variances or whatever we did. So I don't know how the planning board does any of that without having something to go back to. That's what that 50J is. So
I have a question. I'm sorry, but I thought the point was though that we are limiting the requirements for non-residential parking. So even if the use changes to make it more intense or less intense, if we're saying that a non-residential use doesn't need parking, then isn't that what the planning board looks at? I think what you're saying is that you don't necessarily agree that non-residential parking should be eliminated all around. Because you want exceptions
Oh,
to
you're talking
say
to me?
that.
You're talking to me?
This old-
You're talking to me?
Yeah, I am. I'm
No,
clarifying, I
no.
guess. Sorry.
I'm
Because
in
you're saying, because you're
favor.
bringing up those old formulas, which sometimes get a little antiquated and sometimes put a lot of burden on small business owners to be able to open. And I think the point is if we're trying to make it less car heavy and we're trying to make it easier for small businesses to open by eliminating some of these parking requirements, then we should just eliminate it. But if you're worried that certain uses or intensity of uses or bigger restaurants or whatnot might not fall into that eligibility, then that's like a different issue. But
Can
I'm
we
for
tie
eliminating.
this- Can we tie this requirement or to both their points? So there's a difference in my mind to somebody opening a business in a downtown or a business district in an existing building that has no parking of its own. And so how are they fitting a requirement for parking when they don't have it? All the parking's public or on street, right? So, and then there's another difference between having a lot, building a project that has room for parking on site. So maybe, I don't know what that differential is. Is it a planning board approval? Because to the point we just had before, where there's exterior improvements, that's when it goes for site plan approval. And presumably something like the bar, they would have, they have a site plan approval necessary and then the requirements. So is there a way we can make that difference in not requiring it where they couldn't provide it anyway and requiring it where they're doing on-site?
So
Well, then
where,
I bring up what Mr. Hellcamp said, which is that we want to reduce parking requirements and cars. And I just feel like that is just saying, I don't know. Sorry, I
Okay.
lost my train of
Wait a
thought.
second, Ms. Engel. I wanted to hear from Ms. Credidio for my question.
so in your example, Mayor, the existing building, right, is a pre-existing non-conforming structure because it doesn't have whatever parking requirement is required by the zoning code.
Mm-hmm.
And to the extent that they needed other planning approvals, they would then trigger the review of all of their nonconformities. Right? That's generally how those approvals work. So if I need to go in for site plan, if I'm, for example, putting an addition on the back of the business, and it's not just parking, it's, if you have existing setbacks, et cetera, that are too close to the street, you often see a planning application that will also include variance relief sought for their other pre-existing nonconformities.
Right, but if we want to eliminate parking requirements,
Mhm.
basically in this downtown of Springfield Avenue, which is the PRB zone, can we do that without impacting projects like at the corner of Rutgers and Spring that Mr. DeLuca was referring to?
Well, you don't generally see in zoning codes that kind of dichotomy between what is
Then how do we deal with this?
existing.
Because
Yeah, so because in that example I was giving you about this restaurant that changed, when the restaurant was there, maybe had 30 parking spaces. Different kind of use. Bar came in with 11 apartments above. They were required to have 11 parking spaces for the tenants. So that took away from that 30 down to 19, say. So if you're looking at it as a planning board member, how do you say, okay, this is the bar, you have so many seats or so many square footage, and I look up on 50J and I see you're supposed to have 25 parking spaces, but you only have 19. We're going to give you a variance for 6. So all this says is it becomes the baseline upon which the planning board can make that judgment. Otherwise, they go from 0, right?
Right.
Well, but so I suppose that's a little bit of my point, right? So say I'm starting with an empty lot and I'm building the same uses. we're making the general, and I'm, as of right, I'm within my other planning requirements. If we're making a policy determination that that kind of use doesn't require parking, what was there, both of those restaurant, bar, housing structures, I think we would all think need the same amount of parking, whatever that amount is, regardless of what was there before. Makes sense?
I don't get that.
No, that doesn't.
So there's an empty lot on the corner of Wellesley and Springfield Avenue, an apartment building built next to it. Suppose this empty lot, they decided, I don't feel like building parking, or I don't feel like building residential, I'm going to build stores. And I don't have any requirement to park off-site. So I build, I can do 80% coverage of the lot, so I build this huge store. Where do those people park? And shouldn't somebody be looking at that so that the neighbors there don't end up with all these cars in their neighborhood?
But so that's a great example. So I don't know that that's necessarily captured by one of our exceptions.
That is because it has to go to the planning board.
Why? If it's within, if it's,
It's a site plan approval.
Site plan approval.
Huh, it's site plan approval has to go. But then then the planning
It-
board has nothing to base their parking stuff on.
Right. I don't think the exemption that we just fashioned would apply in that scenario, right? The redevelopment exception, because that was a redevelopment.
No, that wasn't a redevelopment.
Oh, it wasn't?
No.
Okay.
I see your point. It's not just where you're seeking variance relief.
No, the variance is the least of it. I'm concerned that whoever's looking at the site plan has no basis upon which to judge whether to approve this or not, because we're eliminating parking. And I understand we're eliminating parking to do exactly what Ms. Engels talked about, is so that we're not saddling small businesses with off-street parking requirements. But this is not that. These are site plan. These are people who go in and develop stuff.
Yeah.
Are you looking to make this applicable to small businesses? Like, is that,
I'm just looking to make it applicable to projects so that we don't dump the uses of a development into the parking into the neighborhood. That somehow somebody says, okay, look, we have zero requirement, but what you're proposing really requires 20 parking spaces, so we'll agree to let you build 10. But right now, the planning board can't even do that because there's nothing to negotiate.
Right. So the proposal as stated, including the exemptions, and this is why when we talked about this township attorney Credidio earlier today, I explained, or I mentioned that it sort of was fashioned out of our site plan exemption, our recent site plan exemption, because we have to keep it consistent with that, right? Like, yeah, ultimately we want to get rid of all parking requirements, but what we're saying here is, sure, we're taking that first right step toward elimination of on-site parking for non-residential, but there have to be some exemptions, and these exemptions allow us to be consistent across the board, right? Because it references, this language is almost very similar to the language that we have in the site plan exemption. To Mr. DeLuca's point, how will the planning board know what to do otherwise?
Yeah, and I can't think of an example in the village. I was just walking down the village through my head and because every mixed use new project that's come up and had to go before the planning board, it's been in redevelopment zones. So it's been, zoned already differently.
yeah, it's been a little more.
But to my point, there's no requirement in Maplewood Village. Somebody opens a restaurant and a storefront, they're not required to provide parking. But in some downtowns, believe me, there's still a parking requirement which severely limits business recruitment and what you can get to go into sites because they're required parking and there's no opportunity for them
Look, if there's a way you could figure out
to figure out.
how if you have an empty lot and somebody comes in and proposes to build something, that we have the right to say that we want some parking and then figure out a way how you base that parking. You just can't pull it out of the air. That's why I was saying, let's use what we have. So the other stuff that we dealt with, as the mayor just said, we dealt with that stuff. So if I have a storefront and it's empty and I rent to somebody and you're not doing any exterior stuff, you don't need to go for a site plan. You don't need to provide parking.
Right.
But if you're going to take a building, you're going to take the Wine Barrel building, which has a huge parking lot, and expand that building to another 50% and keep the Wine Barrel there and not have, and add more commercial space and not have parking. Then that means that, Ms. Engel, you know where they're going to be parking at the Wine Barrel, because I had to deal with
Gonna
those.
be blocking my driveway.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So, when we talk to people about this stuff, we say, that there is on-site parking for these larger developments. So if you could figure a way to do that, and by the way, the thing, conversion of residential use to non-residential use is pulled from the village
Right.
section. So,
Mhm.
and if we want to, as I said, there's only like maybe 4 residential, solely residential. So you want to eliminate that, that's fine. I'm just concerned that whoever is looking at this, whether it be the planning board at a site plan, or even the township committee as the redevelopment authority, that we have some basis upon which to negotiate or to have a discussion with a developer. Right now, if we have nothing and just say parking shall not be required for non-residential uses, you come in and want to build something, we can't even have a conversation about parking.
So I think what you're looking for is unless,
Yeah, these are
this
exemptions.
would, yeah,
Understand?
yeah. I mean,
So you can
you
figure it
think
out.
that at some point, somebody's not going to build like a huge, big shopping mall or expand the Wine Barrel without parking because they wouldn't have people to come visit.
They might.
Mhm.
They might.
So, I mean, but I think, if you're using Avenue Pub as an example of, you think like that they need to have parking there in order for it to be viable, I don't know. I think that they could have less parking.
No, I'm not talking about for it to be viable. I'm talking about so it isn't a nuisance on the residential neighborhood.
Yeah, I would also like to look at the public parking lots that we have. Like we have the Yale lot, we have the Maple Crest lot, like we have lots in our town. And so I don't know if maybe this is something that tie into it, but like, we should be encouraging people to park there. We have street parking, we have these lots. That Yale lot is never full. Like there's never cars back there.
Right, but I mean,
They're not going to
Wouldn't be.
park at Yale Lot and go to the Avenue Pub. They're going to park on the residential street on Harvard.
Yeah.
on-
Where it's easier.
On Rutgers.
Yeah,
Well, if
closest.
they're going to a
Yeah.
pub, they should be taking Uber.
Okay,
Yeah.
so this is what I'm going to propose. I'm going to propose that we take this back to code. Is that fair? And
oh, I thought Ms. Credidio was just going to fix it for us, so we didn't have to talk about it anymore.
I mean, I'm okay talking about it one more
That's
time
what
in
I-
code.
Yeah, we can go back to code.
And maybe wordsmithing a little bit. Is that good with everybody?
Yes.
Okay.
First, before you continue, Mr. Davis, with the next discussion item, it looks like we're going to go past 9:30. Sorry, Mari. But, so I'd like a motion to go past 9:30 for this meeting.
I move it.
Second,
Mr. Daffis,
Yes.
Mr. DeLuca,
Yes.
Herman,
yes.
Mayor Adams.
Yes. Okay. Expanded permitted uses in the CI zone. This is not the least bit. That won't. this-
Oh, yeah, if that had that much discussion, imagine this one. All right, we'll try to get through it though, Mayor. I just want for the public, I kept saying PRB, that's Peter, Robert, Bob. That stands for pedestrian retail business. And I got something from someone here in real time. People are watching us. That's great. Saying, hey, can you define this for the public? So there you go.
Oh.
We aim to please. Okay, so this is again, an opportunity to adopt another recommendation from the master plan. And this has to do with expanding what is currently permitted as a use in the CI zone. And I'm going to tell you what it is this time. It's the commercial and industrial zone. Okay. And for a lot of folks out there, Newark Way is in the CI zone, right? As a point of reference. So the master plan recommends our expanding permitted uses as follows, right? In addition to what's already permitted. These are specifically referenced by the master plan, and they are directly taken right out of the recommendations. And you can go see them for yourself. I think it's pages 98, pages 133, page 134. Indoor agriculture and food production, makerspace, which shall mean a collaborative workspace for making, learning, exploring, and sharing uses, high-tech to no-tech. Artisan studios, art galleries, artist studios. And retail sales. However, pay attention, retail sales as a secondary use to the primary use. So we're talking about retail sales that are limited to products made on site associated with principal uses. So think about a coffee roastery on Newark Way that is allowed to sell the coffee that they make. Okay? Put it in bags and sell it to you, but not all retail. Craft fairs, art shows, and other temporary outdoor weekend sales events are also encouraged. And no, I didn't just lose my point here, my place here. Okay, here we are. I'm back. There are no conditional uses currently in the commercial and industrial zone. Stay tuned for that. Maybe. We'll see how far we can go. The master plan also advises, and I think in fairness, I'm all about discussing these things fairly, even though I'm going to advocate for what I think we should be doing. But in fairness, the master plan explicitly says the following: new permitted uses should complement and not compete with existing industrial uses. Thus, standard retail and restaurant uses should be carefully controlled so as not to push out long-established industrial uses, and the introduction of new residential uses should not be permitted. There's one limited, very narrow exception to that in the master plan, and that is for if we're doing like an artist studio, allowing an apartment for the artist of this, who owns the studio to live there is permitted. So we added an additional expanded use that's not explicitly referenced word for word in the master plan, and that is co-working space. That came up in our discussions about expanding uses in the CI zone, and it certainly is a use that does not compete with existing industrial uses, but rather complements it. So that's another thing. The Code Committee looked at this, discussed this, and they agreed to move forward with these permitted uses. But we did have a very good discussion in Code Committee about expanding uses in this zone. Some members of the Code Committee, myself included, felt that this doesn't go far enough. Sure, this is what our master plan recommends, and we want to do that. But we also recognize that we're not including uses, at least at this stage, that are already happening. Right? So in terms of the master plan being a forward-looking document, maybe some said, proposed, that it may already be outdated. It was, after all, written during COVID, and some of the current uses in the zone were not there yet. Only the bread stand was there, and it was just still new, shiny thing when the master plan was being discussed and drafted. Some advocated for residential uses, and others, myself included, advocated for restaurants and bars again, we have a restaurant that everyone knows already there. The way that that happened is by going to the zoning board and getting a variance, and that process itself is, as we said earlier, onerous and expensive. And the businesses that we're talking about there that are creating these new uses in this neighborhood, in this zone, in the surrounding neighborhood, in this zone, are homegrown businesses. So we want to keep that in mind. We're not talking about big bad Panera or Starbucks or whatever your corporate conglomerate is coming in and taking over and etching people out. These are local homegrown businesses. But if we were to go a bit further and be a little bit more progressive here, at least keep up with what's happening, we would do so in a manner that the master plan recommends, which is carefully controlled. So finding ways to condition, for instance, additional restaurant or bar uses or any residential on Newark Way. So those are my comments and where I'm coming from. We did hear from our merchants in the zone who are leading the way and making a lot of great things happen in the zone. And those comments are included in my comments here tonight for the most part. And first, I'm going to see if there is support for the uses that are already in the master plan. Is there any discussion about those?
The uses that are already in the master plan, not the ones you just ended with.
Correct.
Everybody okay with those that we?
Yeah, is there an issue with the co-working space?
It's not explicitly mentioned in the master plan. It just needs to make sure that there is enough support for including it as a similar related use consistent with the master plan, that we would not be required to give notice to every property owner in the commercial industrial.
So,
Right.
so right now, the permitted uses in the CI zone include office buildings. So office
that would
buildings
be-
is already a permitted use.
That'd be a coworker.
So a co-working space certainly would fit in an office building, right?
I would think so. I'll take a check at the zoning ordinance to make sure that there's not like a separate.
Yeah, so if you want to,
Point is, we may not need to add.
yeah, well, I don't think you need to add it. So just, if we
Just
have
make
office
sure it's
buildings
right,
and
yeah.
somebody wants to open up a co-working space, we already allow office buildings. So,
So are we recommending to take it out?
yeah, if you're concerned about it not being explicit, then we could take it out.
Right.
And the only thing the other one that I added was the Bazaar Craft Fair and under the temporary, and if you feel that's a problem.
We thought it was fine. It was.
Yeah, I said that.
It's still related to the principal permitted use. It's not unrelated, even though there'll be other participants.
So I have, if we're done with, we're all good with what was existing.
Yeah.
Okay. I just have, I think I'm not all the way there to expanding the uses to include restaurants and bars necessarily. I'm not sure I'm ready to take that leap. My concern is two things. One, we already have a mechanism in place, albeit costly somewhat, to go for a variance through the zoning board of adjustment to open something like Artie's, which is what that owner did, right? My biggest concern, and you made the point that these are homegrown businesses, these are great businesses, if we put in the zoning the permitted use of a restaurant or bar or even retail that's not something made on site, we can't control who buys a building and who opens up something that is not as fabulous as the existing uses there. So that's my personal big concern, and I know I've gotten letters and I've had conversations, and this is not directed at, to try to make it difficult. I think my concern is exactly what I said, because then, yes, you can get a Panera, no shade on Panera necessarily, but that's not what I think when we're thinking about this, we're envisioning cool, awesome places like Artie's, but that's not a guarantee. Once it's permitted in the zoning, then we really have no control over what goes there other than a site plan approval, perhaps.
Couldn't we place conditions? Right?
No,
No, not in permitted uses.
no.
To not being like a chain,
Right.
unfavorably litigated in a couple of.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah, you can't,
It's the best of
right.
intentions.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I
That's-
disagree a little bit with what you said, Mayor, only because like you're saying that you want homegrown businesses, cool businesses created by community members. At the same time, you want to send them to zoning and spend a whole lot of money on the zoning, the architect, engineer, the planning, all that goes into it. And so I don't actually think that this opens up homegrown businesses. I'm in support of expanding the uses a little bit because that's what's happening already. We already have restaurants open. We already have a community of business owners who are wanting people to come and go to more than one stop. And so I don't know why we would not want to encourage that to create these you're creating economic development in the area, you're creating a micro community, you're promoting walking because then the community can go walk there. And, you know, I'm supportive of that. So I'm not sure why we'd want to limit it by not expanding the use.
Yeah, I think I explained my hesitation and I don't think it's unfounded. You know, with all due respect to those who are purchasing properties and in that area to open a business, and yes, they're small or homegrown businesses or whatever we want to call it, they're still investing a lot of money in that, and the process is laid out for them to be able to get the use permitted. And it's not, I mean, compared to the price of buying the building and opening a business, it's really not a huge amount of money in comparison to what they would be investing in it. We're not talking about somebody opening a, you know, 1,000 square foot little retail shop. We're talking about much larger opportunities. So with regard to residential though, I'm not sure if I disagree that I'm more favorable to residential being permitted than necessarily right now. And I was already with permitting that, but I have that concern that I stated. So I don't know if I want to hear from.
Can we place conditions on that? On residential?
What kind of conditions are you thinking of?
Well, we'd have to do like a density or, right, a density. No, we don't do that. That's in the redevelopment. We don't really dictate density, do we?
Well-
Per acre?
The master plan recommendation.
Yeah.
You read
I'm so used to redevelopment.
not permitted.
Right.
Carefully controlled and should not be permitted, yeah.
Yeah, so the retail and restaurant is more of the carefully controlled. So, you have a couple of options if you think that that residential is an appropriate use here. You can ask the board to re-examine that piece of the master plan.
Mm.
And see if they have a more updated thought. You know, I hate to go back to the notice question, and it's not that we don't want to give lots and lots of notice, but the requirements, it's just extremely expensive. It's certified mail, everyone affected, zone within 200 feet of the zone, which can be tens of thousands.
What were the requirements for what? A variance?
So if we are changing a
Oh.
zoning ordinance in a way that is not, that is
Not consistent.
opposition to the master plan.
I see. So it's,
Permitted to do that, but we're required to give this additional notice that can be just extremely expensive.
Also, don't we need a supermajority?
Do,
We need 4 votes.
do.
to add something that's not recommended in the master plan.
Correct.
Hmm.
So I'd like to read a sentence from the master plan too that I think we missed. And it does say, and I'll just read the whole thing. The introduction of standard retail and restaurant uses should be carefully controlled in these areas to avoid pushing out industrial uses and transitioning to a business district that could compete with established business areas. So that's what you're talking about, is that you want Newark Way to transition. And I think we need to be careful and separate Newark Way from the restaurants that have opened on the corner of Jacoby Street and Boyden, which are permitted.
Right.
Yeah.
It's a neighborhood business district. Those are permitted, and the developer or the owner of the former gas station, I assume he's going to develop something that's going to be spectacular there.
Mhm.
So no one's complaining about those because those are by right permitted.
Yep.
It's the question on Newark Way.
Yep.
And I think the thing here is that we want to avoid transitioning that area to another business district when, quite honestly, we have not yet succeeded on Springfield Avenue. Why would we create another business district?
Are we saying the neighborhood there doesn't deserve nice businesses within walking
On Newark
distance?
Way, when it's not zoned for businesses, they do have businesses. The businesses can go where the neighborhood business is. So not to bring in more businesses for what? To create another business district and a commercial industrial zone? That's not what this says. The master plan is clear about not doing that.
Right, but it
So-
also says long-established industrial uses, but as those industrial uses phase out, and they are phasing out, I mean, look, this will happen organically, right? It happened without our officially changing our
Right.
our code because it's happening and it's going to continue happening. And the industrial uses, even on Newark Way, are going to be phasing out. And I think maybe that's when we'll have this discussion again and say, okay, let's adopt something that's already happening. But I don't see why we wouldn't want to have another business district.
I don't think that's correct. I don't think industrial uses are phasing out.
Okay.
The CI doesn't just deal with Newark Way, it deals with Rutgers Street too.
Right.
And there are no vacancies. There are no vacancies. There's one vacancy next to the building that's existing there as a restaurant. And that operation moved because they moved. They didn't have enough space and they had to move. And another one went across the street. So they're clearly moving around. People are moving in, people are moving out. Newark Plumbing stopped, South Amboy came in. The place on the corner stopped, a casket company came in. There are industrial uses that are there. There's not like a lot of empty buildings that are not being left on purpose. So again, Newark Way and Rutgers is different than where Jacoby Street and that really great center of
Yeah.
activity is happening.
I'm not confusing the two.
Well,
Yeah, I'm just talking about Newark Way. That's why I referenced Newark Way in the beginning of my comments.
You know, I'm not in favor of changing Newark Way to a retail shop. I think the changes that we're proposing deals with Ms. Engel's talking about. We're talking about spaces where people can start, maker spaces, artist spaces. We've just nailed down the co-working spaces. I think those are the way to start.
I agree with that. I agree with moving forward the ones that we recommend that are in the master plan.
So I just wanted to jump in as well. I wanted to express that I agree with a lot of what Mr. Daffis is saying. I think that we are seeing development happen on Newark Way and nearby that is exciting. And I liked your term, homegrown businesses. I think that's what really makes this stand out. That we're not seeing, these big box retailers, but we're seeing actual Maplewood residents and, homegrown, like New Jersey residents who are opening up, they're taking a chance on this new spot in town and it's working. And so, when we look out for, the community, these are our community members and I think they're doing really good things. This area, as the teenagers would say, it's kind of getting a glow up. If you look at it,
A what?
glow up.
A
That's
glow
what
up.
they say.
Are you too
Like a
old
new
to understand?
haircut, you look at and you see beautiful new awnings, you see more trees, which this area was already, we've talked about it. They don't have as many shade trees. So we see, and I think we're going to see more as Palette opens. And we've got the new crosswalk there in front of Artie's, and we're going to redo DeHart. We're going to see a lot more people walking around this area. And so it is changing. And I feel like as elected leaders, I'd really like to see us embrace that change and, and support it and protect it, And so I'd like to explore ways that we could, like what Mayor Adams was saying, I would like to, like keep, restrict chain stores from opening up, I would love to do that. If we're not able to legally, like, I wonder, like, what other ways, like what, it's my understanding that the master plan allows us to put conditions. So I'd like to talk about like what kind of conditions, how can we protect this space and also support what's happening? So, I mean, I guess that's where I'm at. And, I don't know, if this could be a redevelopment zone or if you can sever Newark Way from Rutgers, because you're right, there's a lot of industrial on Rutgers. But then, like if we can sever those, I think there's some options and I'd like to keep talking about this.
Yeah, I think we can keep talking about it. I think we should keep talking about it. I think this is, zoning is difficult. And it's difficult for a lot of reasons, some of which we've touched on here. Changing zoning is really difficult. And, I don't think any of us is saying anything opposed to any business or business owner or anybody trying to do wonderful things on Newark Way in particular. None of us is saying that I've heard, and I hope it's not taken that way. Just that we have to be really cautious and take very careful steps into any changes we do on this because of a lot of the things we said, because of the unintentional consequences, which we talk about all the time at Code, because thinking through all the way, and yeah, we might want to make it more accessible to one, but not to another, and that's not legal. So we got to try to figure it out. So Mr. Daffis, if it's okay with you that we keep talking about it.
Certainly.
More research is maybe
Always
would be
welcome.
helpful.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we'll
and
keep exploring.
more ideas from those who've been calling on us to add certain uses to the area. Give us some tools with which to do that.
Yeah, we should also engage the community, right? Like we need to do surveys to see what people
Yeah.
also want for themselves who
And
live.
maybe there's a reason it's got to be so, I mean, I know there's reasons that zoning, it's got to be so slow because of, and it may slow the changes that are coming over there. And maybe that's an important slowness to take it carefully.
So then we'll move forward with
The
the,
ones, yeah, that you
The
noted.
yeah,
Group of you.
minus the co-working space because it's already included in office buildings.
Right.
And just to clarify, is that in both the commercial industrial and the special light industrial? Because
The special what?
No,
No,
it's
just
not.
CI.
No, that's a whole nother animal.
That's another discussion. Yeah, because the master plan recommends that the two be combined. And we can get to that discussion on another committee.
So more discussion on that
Yeah.
in the future.
prepare that ordinance for introduction at our next meeting.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
And I-
Overnight.
and I- if, I'm sorry, since you brought up the light industrial area, I would urge each of us to take a ride down Camptown Road before we have that discussion.
Yeah.
About merging
Used to
them?
drive
No,
down
no,
there all the time.
just take a ride down Camptown Road before you think about doing anything. And look at the boundaries of what's Maplewood and what's Irvington, because we can do nothing without concurrence from Irvington in that district.
So if you go Springfield Avenue, you take a right on
You have to
Chancellor.
go into Irvington to get into it. Well, yeah.
Well, yeah, you just
do.
go about a couple blocks down and then take a right onto Camptown Road. Okay.
Maybe the new senior jitney can take us all there.
Yeah, if it
I'd be
ever
afraid
gets
of-
ready.
Down there.
Okay, let's go on to the third discussion item. Hopefully the next several won't take quite as long. Overnight parking and public lots.
So I brought this up at the last meeting, just in my report, that I would be bringing this back to you. So I have a proposal. You all indicated some support to it. That right now we have the list of existing lots is number 3, the Woodland, number 5, Highland, number 6, Yale, and number 10, Prospect. I had suggested number 1, Maple Crest, number 8, Indiana, and Dehart Park. There was some discussion at, I guess, engineering or maybe a public safety, one of the committees, about the concern about all the spots being taken at Maple Crest and at Indiana. So I would suggest we limit that to 40% of the time limited parking spaces. And then the mayor sent an email around asking, why don't we just open it up to all? So I'll just tell you the other spots, the other lots are, number 2 is the lot next to Village Coffee. Number 4 is the New Jersey Transit lot at Baker. Number 7 is the lot behind Bagel Chateau. And then number 9 is Baker Street. This is a list from 2013. There might be more because Rickleton Square I think we might have given. it
I was going to say that we gave them, we converted them to names, and I think we should do that uniformly.
So,
Give the names and the number.
2018.
so what, if I, look, I would not suggest we do anything in the New Jersey Transit lot because people park there really early and
Yeah, no.
I don't think we should do that. But I don't know if you want to do these ones in the village. I think there's sufficient parking at the Woodland and Highland Place in the village.
Yeah, I agree.
I would not, because it gets into very confusing who's parking there beyond limits and
Yep.
overnight and space. So
Yeah, I was just thinking if there was any
there's no
around
other,
town that
no,
were.
there are no other ones.
Kicking off. Okay, cool.
So if everyone's okay, then I'll work with Ms. Credidio and our clerk to get these into a resolution.
Thank you.
Is there any discussion? Or?
I just recommend that while we're doing this, we might as well have a uniform designation for all of our municipal lots. And I recommend that we go from numbered designations to names. The Woodland lot is obvious, the Village Center lot is obvious, and so on and so forth.
I just wanted to ask about the lots that are in the village. Do we know if there's a need there, like residents who live in those apartment buildings?
Richardson can answer that.
You're saying the apartments on Maplewood Ave, both
Yeah,
sides?
is there a need there? Like, have we heard from any of those people who might need an overnight parking spot?
The apartments that are above like the Bagel Chateau side and the coffee shop on the end, there's no problem there because as residents there, they have an agreement with the landlord. They pull their car cinched up to the building and that's where they park. There's never been an issue. But the other side of the street on, let's see, the Coda side and the pub side, those people, if they have extra vehicles that can't fit behind the building where they do have parking, they utilize the Woodland 24-hour from us.
Yeah, so there's 2 lots.
So
in the
there's
village.
really,
that are
they have the
used.
Woodland 24-hour that they could park in. I would say the bulk of the people are from the Claris, though.
Yeah.
But I would say that Maplewood Village area, we can accommodate overnight parking with what we have.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so any more discussion on this? Sure you don't want to make it as long as the other 2 discussion items? We can keep talking. No. Okay. So you've got, you're going to get that ordinance up?
Resolution.
Oh, resolution, sorry. Okay. Amended, Deputy Mayor, you have
Yes.
the next 2 items.
All right, let's see how quickly we can do this.
Yeah.
Okay, so the Recreation Advisory Committee. So, so what I'm proposing is, so the Fields Committee was was created several years ago, and it hasn't taken off. It hasn't met, the members haven't met. It was created with about 20 different members, liaison from here, liaison from there, person from here, person there. And so it ended up being really, it just didn't end up meeting. And this is something that the community has talked about and has wanted to have a committee to discuss the fields in our town. This is a problem that we have had. And I think even, when we were talking in the Engineering and Public Works Committee, and this proposal came up about DeHart Park, and the question was, well, let's run it by our Fields Committee. Well, we don't have one. So what I'm proposing is that we create a subcommittee in the rec committee. And when I went to go and look at that, because a lot of committees in ordinance, they describe the mission of the committee, they describe that, you know, they can have subcommittees, like pool has subcommittees, and they work on different things like marketing or programming. Well, the rec committee, I went to the rec committee and they don't have a mission. And they don't have anything in the ordinance stating that they can have subcommittees. The Recreation Committee website describes the Recreation Advisory Committee as they study and advise the Township Committee, Business Administrator, and Director of Recreation on the acquisition, establishment, improvement, maintenance, and administration of new and existing public parks, recreation facilities, and programs within the township. The committee also reviews the annual budget prepared by the Director of Recreation and Cultural Affairs. But that's just on the website. That's not in the code. So what I'm proposing is that we update the Recreation Advisory Committee ordinance to do the following. Include a mission focus for the Recreation Advisory Committee. I would propose that we start with what's on the website and, you know, maybe explore what are we missing here? What are other areas that it needs to focus on? But I think that's a really good starting point. I would propose expanding the membership from 9 to 12, and bear with me that this is why. Because I would also, I want to add the clause, we've used this in our Youth Advisory Committee description, and I really like it. It says the committee should reflect Maplewood Township's rich diversity, race, gender, ethnicity, sexual orientation, and gender identity, neurodiversity, and geographic. And that's a clause that we put in our youth committee, and I'd like to use that in any of the committees. When we happen to be updating the ordinance, I mean, you know, the feds tell us to take out DEI. We're not doing that here. That's important to us. And then allow for the creation of a subcommittee, such as one for fields. Now, something that we can talk about, and I would like to hear feedback on, is whether or not that subcommittee, so I envision that as including members on the Recreation Advisory Committee, but also being able to include members who are not on the Recreation Advisory Committee, and here's why. Currently, so the Recreation Advisory Committee, there's a lot of things that they do that are not field related. There's a lot of programming. And I think the Fields Committee, the Recreation Advisory Committee members, some of them would like to take part in that, but if they're focusing on fields, I want to make sure that we have members who are on the Rec Committee focusing on programming, and then on the Fields Committee, you know, we get a couple of people in there who have more of a fields background, more of, a background in the kind of uses that we're looking to use on these fields. And I'm also looking toward, like, potentially there are individuals who own like batting cages or, produce uniforms or run like a soccer program, and these people, I may want to hear from them on the Fields Committee. So I don't know, but I wouldn't necessarily place them on the Rec Committee. And so I'm just thinking that there may be other cases. And so this is where, I would sort of define the subcommittee as one that would have members, but would be not necessarily have people outside of Rec, but could, if there was somebody that we thought would, because the idea is we want to have a wide range of voices.
So if the Fields Committee is a subcommittee of the Recreation Committee and the Recreation Committee members are appointed by the governing body, how does that intersect with a subcommittee having members that aren't appointed by?
I think they should be appointed as well. I mean, I think that, but I think the terms can be less because the committee, that's part of how we set it up. I mean, if we're going to set up appointed members on the subcommittee, then I think that we appoint them the way we do the other committees. I think that if we set it up as an ad hoc, then, I don't know, I kind of resist opening up to like hey, anybody who wants to come, comes.
Yeah.
You know, I'd like to keep it more as like a working committee, like we've got a job to do and we're gonna work. But I see it as like, it's not like the other committees have like a 3-year span. This would be a committee, you know, that they serve at the, you know, like the recreation committee decides, you know, or maybe we put that in the ordinance that the committees would need to be renewed, you know, every year.
So the pool advisory committee,
Mm-hmm.
the members are appointed by the township committee, yes?
Yes,
And then they serve on subcommittees, yes?
yes.
Those folks that serve on subcommittees are members of the pool advisory committee who serve on the X, Y, and Z subcommittee.
Yes.
So why couldn't we do the same here?
So RAC only has 9 members and pool has 15.
Right.
So part of that is the difference, that pool has more members, and so you can divide them up. Personally, I think 15 is a bit much for a committee.
Yeah, I agree.
It's just a lot of people.
Right, but
And-
what I'm getting at is your question about how we set it up. If we go to 11, all 11 are appointed by the township committee, or 12. All 12 are appointed by the township committee, and then on to the rec advisory committee, and then some of them serve on the field
Yeah, we could do
subcommittee.
it that way. That's
Yeah.
certainly one way we could do it. It would limit to some extent because, you know, like you would have to be on rec in order to serve on fields. And you know, you'd have to commit to 3 years of serving on rec and advising on all the programming that we have. And so if we have individuals whose specialty is really just fields, and it, you know, then they may not qualify. And then you also have, for example, the previous fields committee had liaisons from different committees. And so, you know, obviously we wouldn't have that. If you serve on another committee, you wouldn't be able to serve on this committee. So like having representation from, like the previous fields committee had like, we wanted a representation from Hilton Neighborhood Association. We wanted a representation from Borden Park Neighborhood Association. I don't know if I don't want to specify all of these things because I think that was what really kept the previous fields committee from getting off the ground. You had to have all of these different individuals.
So I think part of the reason for that was because it was really a conversation about artificial turf versus not, or what are we going to do now that artificial turf got voted down by referendum for the second time? And that's really what, you know, was a hotter topic. So this fields committee is, I think if there's some, I'm fine with it being a subcommittee and even a temporary subcommittee, as subcommittees often are on, you know, in committees. And you can, in a subcommittee, I feel like you can call on people. They're not appointed, so to speak. They don't have to be vetted necessarily, but you could call on somebody with certain expertise who's not on recreation to just, you know, give their advice or be part of a conversation. I don't think it has to be formalized into them being a member. So I would be fine with expanding the committee, but most, you know, bringing in like consults, if you will, like somebody who has expertise, you bring them in to the subcommittee. But I don't feel like you need to have like
Formalize that.
formalized.
Yeah, I
like
hear you.
that we need to appoint the subcommittee, because then it just feels like, and then that has to be defined with its own
Mhm.
thing as opposed to just being a subcommittee of.
I mean, keep it simple, right?
existing committee. Well, it keeps it simple, but it's also reason that there's not a definition of the subcommittee. So
Mhm.
what are we officially appointing them to,
Mhm.
you know? So that's how I feel. I think it should just be rec members, and then those people can call on members of the community to brainstorm or talk in the fields committee without being officially members of it, in my mind.
Mhm.
What do you think?
I support the direction you're moving in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Remember, you know, the Fields Committee was set up, as you say, right after the second referendum against the turf. It really was not created by the Township Committee. It was just set up by the mayor then. And then it never got off the ground. And then Ms. Engel tried to get it off the ground, and it was very difficult because we did have those slots. So, and then I think having it separate from the rec committee doesn't make sense. So I think that's a good thing, is to, it should report to the rec committee, and the rec committee should then work with community services and then bring it back to us and blah, blah, blah. Yeah, I think you should take it back to your Health and Human Services Committee and work out the details. I think whether we appoint the subcommittee or the rec committee appoints the subcommittee, I do think there's something about getting appointed to a committee that gives people a sense of responsibility than just come to a meeting if you want to or not. So how that happens, whether we do it or the rec committee does it, I think having it as a subcommittee of the township, of the rec committee, and having the ability of having non-rec members on is the important thing. So,
Yeah, I support it too.
Yeah.
And while you're at it, in terms of amending the ordinance, you want to take out arts and culture, which is no longer under rec.
Yes, of
So,
course.
Yep.
Ms.
Yeah.
Engel, did you have anything you wanted to add?
No, I was just gonna say I support it, and as far as Ms. Herman's concerned about like 3-year terms versus field committee, maybe it should be shorter. Like, I feel like they might still be working on fields for 3 years, because we have to design the field, we have to build the field, we have to manage usage, we have to figure out, and some of it is programming. So I'm not as concerned about the term limits, but I agree with everything you're saying and would be supportive of the field committee being under rec advisory, and however you deem necessary for the makeup of that committee, to make sure that it's diverse. And I'm sure that my environmental advisory committee liaison would like to come to those meetings if he's included. Thank you.
So I'll work on the details so that we can see sort of like put this discussion into language and we
Yeah.
can see what that looks like.
sounds good.
Okay, the
Great.
next one is.
And the
All
next
Access.
one is the All Access Committee.
This is the longest meeting since I've been there. I'm just-
Because we're doing a lot of stuff.
A lot of good stuff.
Okay, so the All Access Committee. The All Access Committee resolution only ran until the end of 2024. It expired on December 31st, 2024. So I'd like to reauthorize this resolution and appoint several community stakeholders and get started. My understanding is that this committee was authorized for only 1 year with that expiration date as a trial basis to get it started. And I would recommend that we continue this model of having the committee run a full year from, I would recommend enactment, so March 2025 to March 2026, just to give it more time to get established and make their recommendations. As the resolution spelled out, the committee would essentially, for the first year, they would come up with their proposals and present a plan to the Township Committee with their recommendations, and including in that their recommendation for continuance. So I'm flexible on that date if we want them to finish at the end of this year. It just doesn't give us a lot of time. So I have been talking with individuals who have volunteered to be on the committee, so I do feel very confident that we can get this up and running pretty quickly. But that's sort of my thinking on the timing of it. I would also recommend that we refine the focus of the committee so that our purpose is clear. The Access for All Committee in Waldwick, where Mr. Wary worked previously, had this as its mission: enhancing the lives of people with disabilities and their families by improving access to everyday activities, increasing public awareness, and advocating for inclusivity in our community. So there are Access for All communities that run throughout Bergen County: Maywa, Ridgewood, Fairlawn, Tenafly, Park Ridge, Oakland. Close to us, Livingston has a committee, and theirs is called LACD, that stands for Livingston Advisory Committee for Disabilities. And their committee's been running for about 20 years. And the mission statements for these groups are all very similar, and they speak to the desire to, quite simply, enhance the quality of life for the disabled community and those who have physical mobility challenges and their families. So that's what I would recommend that we do with the All Access Committee here. And specifically, I think it's important to use the language and definitions that align with the state Division of Disability Services, and listing the disability communities, specifically how they do in the state and federal, so that we can, just be very clear. And also, this would open us up to be able to grants that are available. So those specifically would be, one, intellectual and developmental disabilities. People call this IDD. Physical disabilities, including brain injury, blind, visually impaired and deafblind, and hard of hearing, veterans on disabilities. Those are the 5 categories that our state spells out. For our committee in Maplewood, I would recommend that we go a little bit further and also include the following, which our community has specifically spoken out about wanting inclusion for. And that would be neurodivergent and other neurological disorders, learning disabilities, and mental health disorders. And then, beyond the date, the mission, those terms, I would expand the committee membership from 9 to 12, and I would note that it should also include representation by individuals who are themselves disabled or physically challenged and/or neurodiverse. And finally, I would expand the scope of the evaluation. Currently, the resolution has it so that you would be looking at programs, events, these sorts of things, but I would also include it to expand it to include facilities and infrastructure, including but not limited to ADA compliance and best practices. And so I envision the committee also being able to look at the width of our like our sidewalks, the eateries, new developments, and just making sure that it's basically, this would be a place where residents who have mobility challenges can come to and, and say, hey, this area right here, I'm not sure if anybody was thinking about, but these stairs are actually really difficult to have in this spot. So just stuff like that, where they would be able to look at that as well. So the idea is that we would make our wonderful town even more accessible. And in doing so, in making it more accessible for this community, we would also be making it more accessible to others. So that is what I propose, and I have been working on the language with some of the folks that I've been talking to who want to be on the committee. So I'm very excited that I can share that with everyone, and Ms. Credidio, kind of a redlined version of the resolution. So hopefully, not trying to take your job, but yeah, so that's what I propose. Questions?
Yeah, I think it's great. And it's in line with the original scope that we contemplated when we started discussing this way before Mr. Wary joined us. But certainly we brought it up during his interview, and he said, hey, I can do this for you. I've done it before, which was a big plus. But in my conversations during the Walk with the Mayor health and wellness campaign, I spoke to families with children who are neurodiverse, who are special needs, and this was their interest. This was the scope that they were looking for, and this will help us combat ableism in our community, right? It was never intended to be a DEI, access to all inclusive. It's really narrowly focused to the scope that you mentioned. And I agree that we should be consistent with the state definition so that we can be eligible for grants.
And I think we can also use that same clause that are in our other committees about making sure that the membership reflects the rich diversity of our town.
Yeah.
I'm in favor. You have any comments?
No, do we have an ordinance now, or is this by resolution?
This
We're
is by
talking about putting
resolution.
an ordinance in, right? Doing it by ordinance or resolution?
So the proposal is that we would do this by resolution for 1 year, and then the recommendations
Okay.
from them would, we would then move it to, after that 1 year, it would then be an ordinance that we would hopefully create this as
I
a,
would only change it to start it, maybe run it like 15 months by resolution so that you have time to get members and get busy before all of a sudden it's a year from March.
I'm prepared to bring members that I'm proposing
Right away.
to our next meeting.
Oh, okay.
So
What?
June 30 of 26, maybe?
Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean,
It always takes longer.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, might as well do
That's
it.
why I thought. Ms. Engel, did you have anything you'd like to add?
No, but I'm fading, so I'm gonna sign off and
Okay.
say bye.
Feel better.
Okay, so you have your
Right.
marching orders.
All right.
And your approvals. So we'll go to the last discussion item, yay, is for support for, we heard some people speak out, including environmental advisory, and as far as support for the bill, the Climate Superfund Act bill. So we did, I think I brought a resolution to the Township Committee several years ago. I don't remember exactly what year, maybe it was 2018, to pass a resolution in support of any legal challenges or lawsuits, I should say, to file lawsuits against the fossil fuel industry. We passed that. We were one of the first municipalities to do so. And not long after that, maybe 6 months to a year after that, the state attorney general did indeed file suit against fossil fuel industry. And of course, that's still going. Since then, I'd say about 20 other states, maybe even it's over 25, have also signed on to sue the fossil fuel industry. I don't know if this bill will pass, will go any farther, or if the fossil fuel industry will lobby it to death and throw money at it, but
You think?
you think? So, but especially, I just put this forth to see if I have consent from this township committee. Apparently I do.
Yeah, I think it's great because we have the governor's election and this is going to be a defining line between some candidates and others.
Ooh, yeah. Past the primary?
Maybe even in the.
Maybe even into primary. Okay, so
We should give a shout out to our assemblywoman, right?
yes, and our senator. Is he our senator?
No.
No, never mind. No, no, well, shout out to John McKeon as our former assemblyman, but to Garnett Hall as the co-sponsor on the Assembly companion bill. And we'll ask Ms. Credidio to, or we just do a resolution now? We can just.
We can vote on it now and she can memorialize
She
it.
can memorialize it.
Let's do that.
She's gonna have to watch the videotape. He left.
We can tell her.
Okay, so I have a motion from me. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, Ms. Fritzen.
Mr. Daffis?
Yes.
Luca?
Yes.
Ms. Herman?
Yes.
Mayor Adams?
Yes, thank you. Thanks, everybody. I'll ask for a motion for the consent agenda.
Move it.
Second.
Mr. Daffis?
Yes.
Luca?
Yes.
Ms. Herman?
Yes.
Mayor Adams?
Yes, thank you. It's up to our public comment, any subject matter, since there's no one in the room. Mr. Weary, is there anyone online who would like to speak to the township?
If anyone joining on Zoom would like to speak, please raise your hand now. I see no hands, Mayor.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Deputy Mayor. You wanted to say something?
I wanted to add, I thought, but I wasn't totally sure. I wanted to check. Our state senator, Senator Burgess, is a co-sponsor. So I wanted to give her a shout out as well.
Assemblywoman, right?
No.
No, Senator, or Senator Burgess.
Oh,
Burgess.
she is?
So there's a different bill in the Senate then.
There,
Wait, this
Then-
is a Senate bill. Yeah.
this
It's a
is.
Senate
Senate
and Assembly bill.
Assembly.
Yeah, yeah. So okay, great. Great, awesome.
Yeah, it's the same bill. It's in the House.
Signed on, you mean?
Yeah, no, it's co-sponsored in the Senate by, well, I guess it's McKeon and Burgess then in the Senate.
Well, it was definitely Bob Smith, so regardless, we thank them
Okay.
all and we support
Anyway,
it. Yeah.
we support it.
Can I get a motion to adjourn, please?
So moved.
Thank you.
Second.
Yes.
Yes.
Herman?
Yes.
Mayor Adams?
Yes, thank you. We'll see everybody at our March 4th meeting and Women's History Month. So there we go. Have a good evening.
Oh, budget next week.
Oh, well, we already mentioned it. Nobody's watching anymore.